If you're in the market for a Cook Islands bank account, or you just want to know what options you have for banks in Rarotonga, well, you've come to the right place. In today's video, we're taking a look at opening a Cook Islands bank account as a foreigner. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. Now, to help you get started with banking in the Cook Islands as a foreigner, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts in places like Cook Islands. So don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. Before we dive into account opening particulars, let's pull back the curtain on this tiny South Pacific nation so you can make an informed decision. Chances are you already know the Cook Islands are renowned for asset protection and international trusts. And if you know anything about internationalization, you know that the Cooks have some of the strongest trust laws in the world. So it's no surprise that international media outlets have aimed to cast a sinister shadow over the islands. The New York Times, Forbes, and the ICIJ have all run features demonizing the protections offered to the wealthy through the asset protection laws introduced by the Cook Islands. But mainstream media aren't the only ones shining a spotlight. The internet abounds with references to the Cook Islands being an international financial center or an international banking hub. But the Cook Islands aren't really a financial center at all. Instead, this country is a hub for asset protection. In fact, it's worth mentioning that for many people, the Cook Islands offer a sound option for international asset protection. But banking is a completely different ballgame. According to the Ministry of Finance in the Cook Islands, the country's banking sector has just over $300 million US in assets. Now, if you compare that to Andorra at around $16 billion, Bermuda at $21 billion, Cyprus at $68 billion, or Jersey at around $180 billion, you start to wonder, well, who is actually banking in the Cook Islands? You see, no matter how great a country's asset protection laws are, it can still have an unattractive banking sector. And sometimes the better a country's asset protection laws are, and the more often people use them, the more challenges that country's banks can face internationally. And that's exactly what many people discover when they attempt to start banking in the Cook Islands. Now, let's talk about whether you should open a Cook Islands bank account. Opening a Cook Islands bank account is something that many people consider. However, those people are usually tied to the Cooks in one way or another. Let's take a closer look. Do you have a Cook Islands trust? Well, if you set up a Cook Islands trust, you might be realizing that opening an international bank account isn't going to be as easy as your lawyer promised. But hey, you already paid for a trust, set up some LLCs or IBCs to hold assets, and now you're wondering, how do you open a bank account? In most cases, after tapping out all other options, people start to look at options in the Cook Islands. After all, banks in the Cooks are familiar with Cook Island trusts, so it should be possible. Secondly, do you visit the Cook Islands frequently? The Cook Islands also play host to around 170,000 visitors each year, with direct flights to Rarotonga taking only 4.5 hours from Auckland or 7.5 hours from Sydney. So maybe, if you're a frequent visitor, you might decide that it would be a good idea to have a Cook Islands bank account to support your tourism activities. But for everyone else, you're probably not going to find many reasons to open a Cook Islands bank account. And speaking from experience, there are plenty of other banking options you should be considering instead. But if you're struggling to open accounts and think that the Cook Islands might be the only destination that'll work for you, keep watching. We're going to dig a little deeper into banking in the Cook Islands, the banks in Rarotonga, and some of the reasons why you should and shouldn't open bank accounts here. We'll also dig into account opening for foreign companies and non-residents, as well as the process to start opening accounts. Now, let's look at some of the reasons that people might choose to bank here. As we've already pointed out, the robust asset protection laws offered by the Cook Islands have long made the country popular among high net worth individuals looking for international trusts. In many cases, these settlers, people who set up a trust, look at the most obvious place to open bank accounts for their new asset protection vehicles, the Cook Islands. But there are a few other reasons why people and companies are attracted to the Cook Islands, especially when compared to other offshore banking jurisdictions. Here's a few of the reasons why someone might opt to open an offshore bank account in Rarotonga. Official language of the Cook Islands is English. The Cook Islands use the New Zealand dollar. The legal system is based on the British common law. In 2020, the Cook Islands graduated to the OECD whitelist. You can open accounts remotely. Minimum balance requirements are low when you compare them to other banking hubs. And opening an account should take less than 2 weeks. Here's what opening a Cook Islands bank account looks like nowadays. Today, there are a handful of banks operating in the Cook Islands, including the ANZ Banking Group, ANZ, Bank of South Pacific, BSP, Bank of Cook Islands, BCI, and Capital Security Bank, CSB. But if you're like most people looking to bank in Rarotonga, chances are you want an international or offshore bank account. In that case, your options are a little bit more limited. While ANZ, BSP, and CSB all have international banking licenses, only one of them actually offers banking services to international clients, and that's CSB. In fact, since 2014, Capital Security Bank has been the only bank in the Cook Islands to actually use its international banking license to offer asset management and custodian services to international clients. If you're already a GlobalBanks insider and believe that this is the right choice for you, just submit a request form and we'll contact you directly. Now, some of the requirements for opening a bank account as a foreigner include a certified copy of the account holder's passport and proof of address, among other things. In other words, to open an account here, you'll need to be ready to jump through the normal account opening processes that you would face in any other country. Additionally, there are some challenges that you should be aware of. The Cook Islands are still relatively unknown outside of the offshore industry and international trust experts, so transferring money in and out of the country could raise a few eyebrows with your foreign bank. And just because the Cook Islands are on the OECD whitelist right now, doesn't mean they're always going to be. The country has been on blacklists and gray lists in the past. And depending on how things in the future go, there's a risk that such appearances, could be repeated. There's also a severe shortage of professional talent in the Cook Islands. And the talent pool shrinks every year. With New Zealand passports, many qualified locals find more opportunities abroad than in the middle of the South Pacific. The mass exodus of local professionals is expected to get worse in the future and strain both the private and public sectors. So when it comes to banking, you might find customer service lacking compared to what you'll find elsewhere. But more than anything, the biggest challenge facing Cook Islands bank accounts and banks in Rarotonga has nothing to do with the islands at all. There have been instances within the last few years where Cook Island banks have actually lost their ability to send and receive certain currencies, including US dollars. This happens when their correspondent banking relationships, CBRs, are terminated, either for breaching the rules of that relationship or, more often than not, due to de-risking pressure from foreign governments, like the US or EU. When a CBR is terminated, banks can no longer send international transfers. You can't access your money, and your cash is effectively frozen. Essentially, if you have any assets tied up in a Cook Islands bank that loses their CBR, you'll have to wait until they find another correspondent bank to access your cash, and that can take months. This is becoming an increasingly important consideration for people opening international accounts in small banking jurisdictions. Global regulatory bodies like FATF, OECD, and the EU are all stepping up pressure on foreign jurisdictions known for asset protection and low or no tax. And their weapons of choice are adding countries to the blacklists, followed by cutting correspondent bank access. As always, when opening bank accounts abroad, we encourage you to do your due diligence and make sure that you're choosing a bank that's not only right for you, but is also capable of protecting your money for the long haul. And that means making sure that you can access your money no matter what happens. In conclusion, offshore banking in the Cook Islands could be interesting for people who already have trusts or other entities in the country and want to keep their financial assets within the same jurisdiction. But in most cases, there's already alternative banking options that will provide more value, a wider selection of banking products, and more stable CBRs to ensure that you can always have access to your money. If you're a high net worth individual, have a Cook Islands trust or offshore company, and are struggling to find banking options, we can help. If you want to know which specific banks will accept you, which account opening strategies to use, how to avoid high fees and overcome tough paperwork requirements, we'd be happy to help you on your journey. All you have to do is join our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get instant access to our entire archive of banking intelligence reports, access to the GlobalBanks database, home to more than 250 banks from 50 plus countries, including detailed bank profiles, client preferences, and a whole lot more. Finally, you'll also get real-time analyst support from our team of experts. ready to answer your most pressing banking questions and to make suggestions on which banks in the Cook Islands and elsewhere will best meet your objectives. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about GlobalBanks Insider. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.